Welcome to Draw Process. I'm Ike. I'm going to draw page 49 of my comic First Sun and Sword today, and thumbnails, pencils, inks, finished page at the end, and my thoughts along the way. So, page 49. Sun is charging at Croc. He's holding Dragonessa's sword and letting out a yell. Stop it, leave him alone. The sword plunges all the way to the hilt into King Croc's ribs, who instinctively flicks his tail at the boy, knocking him back. And King Croc crumples back off of Sword, which relieves that pressure on Sword's chest. He rolls over and coughs. There's a lot of actions to be captured in this page. We have to show that I could have extended it beyond one page, but this is what I felt would fit, and it turned out I was right. I was able to fit this into one page. But we haven't shown that Sun has the sword in hand. We saw him in the presence of the sword, freed from his chain, ready to attack or do something. He looked over, he knew that Sword was in trouble. So then he's got the Dragonessa's sword in his hand, up and ready, lunging forward. I went for a nice long horizontal panel for that. And then I thought I might show his feet running. That's the next thing I scribbled there. But I decide against that. I want to show the moment of impact and of the sword going into the ribs. But I want to show it in such a way that I get a good establishing shot on this page, because you'll see page 48 to the left. This was my thumbnail for that page. There is not a good establishing shot yet on this 2-page spread. It seemed like a good way to do it in this moment. So I skip his feet running, and we just show him in the air lunging into the side of King Croc, and we get a good establishing shot of where everyone is at in space. So there's Sword underneath King Croc. And you'll notice that I draw beyond a panel border, and then I start to draw a box around what I've drawn to kind of fit, to figure out where these edges of this panel could be. And now I'm figuring out the perspective on the floor. Like, where are they in this room? Does this look good as well? The moment of seeing, I showed him flying through the air, plunging it into King Croc's side, but I wanted a moment of seeing his face as he's digging it in, and I wanted the reader to really see that point of contact into King Croc. So we have a shot of just Sun there, gritting his teeth and pushing on that sword while the sword is all the way into the leathery side of King Croc. And then I thought, okay, I've got to show Sun getting hit by the tail. Maybe we can see King Croc's head in that shot too, but definitely his tail. I decided to leave King Croc's head out of it. It's just literally the tail and Sun in the air getting hit by it. And then in the bottom, another long panel. I'm trying to figure out what to show. So we got Sun in the foreground having fallen down, and maybe King Croc in the background. But I also want to show that Sword is coughing. He's struggling, but he's got relief. He's not being pressed on here. So I switched the angle. I got the camera by Sword. So Sword's right there on the left, and we are actually going to be looking under the legs of King Croc from Sword on the left in the foreground to Sun in the back on the right. So Sword on the left, Sun on the right, and this King Croc's long form, framing the top of that panel. So another long horizontal panel there. So, and then I did a small thumbnail version of it up in the top right corner in Sharpie. And now I'm double checking my lines and stuff. with the Sharpie. That's one more chance to check where things are at. All right. So, yeah, an effective page. Important things happen. Not a lot of dialogue. Sword is back in the action. So I think he needed some relief in that moment. As I write these fight scenes, I just have to go by feel. And so, if he's getting crushed under King Croc, how does he get out of that? Well, this is the moment that Sun steps in. So it's just, does it feel true to the story? Does it feel like it's saying what I want the story to say? Does it help things move along? Like sequentially, the storytelling, ABC. I'm just thinking those things through, and I'm just figuring it out. I think about the physical space they're in. In this case, it was a small, enclosed room. No escape, no way to use the space to your advantage. So I set up a fight where Sword is going to be circling King Croc to his weak side, trying to exploit that. I just try to think of, what might someone do that's a master, that's a skilled fighter, and I'm not that skilled. I don't know how to sword fight, but I'm just trying to use my best judgment with my limited background. So we have that. And I decided there would be a slower buildup to bigger action, that King Croc would attack more cautiously at first, testing Sword, and Sword would handle it very well. And so Sword would be coming out on top of each exchange at the start. But it's only because King Croc was being so cautious. And King Croc would get a few injuries, but not bad. So this is how it progressed in my mind, what feels right. So there's, is it believable is important, but at the same time, it's a story. So it's not simply, is this how two people would fight, or a crocodile and a man? Is this how they would fight? Does it feel accurate and realistic? That's not the only consideration, because it's not reality, and we want a good story. We don't want people to just, die fall over and appear dead when from a slight wound, or or struggle coughing on the ground for 3 pages before they die. Like those things would confuse the reader. They would wonder, is this person going to get back up? So it needs to be a clear death when it's a death, or if they're unconscious, a clear being unconscious. And so this, it's not reality. And also in the story, that Sword doesn't just do better at the start of the fight because King Croc is being cautious. That it's just a matter of a chess game between them, and this is the point at which Sword's going to do better. It's also because I want the fight to build in intensity, for story purposes, to build towards a climax. So it has to start less intense and build towards the greater intensity. And that's why we get to this point, which still isn't the final intense point that we've seen yet, but we get to the point where Sword is being crushed. And I take a long whole page to show his struggle and pain in that being crushed. To give, and it's large, it's just 4 panels. That was the page before this one. They're large on the page. It's sort of a pause from all the action we've been seeing to show the pressure, how bleak things are looking for him. So this is really a turning point in the fight, and story-wise, that this is when its clear sword is not going to pull through as winner, without help or without maybe losing his life. And he has that injured foot. That was another important moment, is when he becomes injured, it's clear that he's now in greater danger. The risk is higher. So, and on a storytelling level, he committed to trying to save the boy, and he went to face the fight. But it sort of tests his resolve when it becomes more clear that he will lose. And then it's like, okay, you came to do this fight. Maybe there was a possibility of getting away, or maybe giving up and letting the boy be taken if you could escape. You embraced that this was going to be a test of your skill. But that's one thing when you might be succeeding. But once you're really failing that test that you put yourself in, which is how he interprets it, how do you handle yourself? And in a way, this is a moment, because this is, the first story. This is a moment to reveal a little more about his character, that despite Sword being so controlled and careful in how he engages in the world, he also embraces death. He embraces that risk at the right time, when his sense of duty requires it of him. And so yeah, it's that too. Now, that first panel there, while I was talking, I noticed you will see me draw sun there. And I erased it and redrew it a few times. A simple little drawing, took me a few tries. That's an interesting thing, that it's not that it's incorrect drawing, or that I want to adjust his expression, but like adjust the style a little bit. That I was trying to make it look a little more simple lines and shapes, a little more stronger graphical shape, like the angles of his lines, of his body and his head, everything kind of pointing in a stronger direction. So like little adjustments that ate up some time, because I'm trying to train myself towards a particular style. If I had just been trying to draw the image, I could have been done on the first try. So that had to do with me reflecting on where I'm trying to go with my style, and like trying to push it a little further each time, which ate up some time, but it's that's part of a learning experience that I can put into a page production, instead of the page production just being about getting the assembly line, getting the work done. And I think that's great. If you can figure out how to learn everything on the page, that would be pretty cool. There's definitely, I like to, study things in a sketchbook separately. But at the same time, if I could produce more pages more often, spend more time doing that, but make sure that my process of doing that includes some learning opportunities and reflecting on what I'm doing, and like maybe looking up reference and working out those things a little more, so that you're a little better by the end of that page. That's cool too, and it's definitely something I want to incorporate, even though I will continue to sketch separately. and study things separately. And I am looking forward to producing more pages at a much faster rate down the road. Right now I'm in a strange place. I moved and I'm sitting in my new office that's getting put together. It's going to be very nice, the nicest space I've ever had, and a great space to record and do virtual meetings and everything. So I'm looking, and it's also a year on this channel, so I'm looking at changing and upgrading how I do things here. Also doing more of it with Clever Kaiju, seeing how I can do this with Clever Kaiju, with other artists and creators. Produce more pages, like I said. There's so much in the air that I'm thinking about trying to change and accomplish at this sort of transition point, and it fell well at when I moved. I literally moved, so everything's a transition point right now for me. And I haven't even drawn pretty much at all in like an entire week. This is the longest I've gone without drawing a page, the longest I've gone without, sketching and drawing. I think I did a little bit, but not much. Not maybe 15 minutes, not enough that I can recall or count it. So it can it forced me to take like a real break, a real pause at this point of transition, and really dwell on, chew on what it is that I want to do next, with all that kind of tension building and desire to get started again, but sort of postponing that a little bit. And then even with the things I want to do, to not rush it, just because I'm passionate about it in the moment, but dwell on it and think about it and do it in the right way at the right time, figure it out. So building tension here. And it can be a strange feeling, because then you're also like, well, what am I doing? I don't feel good about not doing as much drawing. About not knowing what I'm going to do next, and I don't want this pausing kind of pregnancy period to take too long. But I'll get that feeling, but I also need to allow for the time of the pregnancy, let's say, of the sense that you're birthing something, you're sort of waiting for it to be ready. So, letting all that build. So, it's interesting, and we will see what I can do. Right now, I don't think there's anything I can say about it. I'm really considering working with the Clever Kaiju community for YouTube, like videos, podcasts, type things, and to cross promote each other, run Kickstarters together, this kind of thing. I'm not positive that I can do this, or that it is what I should do. I'm really leaning that way, and I'm trying to figure out the details, but I'm withholding my judgment at the moment until I work out more of the details. But it does excite me. So there may be something like that coming around the corner here. But I do love having my channel, Ike Comics, here. This is a space where it's really just me getting to share my thoughts, my process. This sort of self-reflection, intimate kind of communication, it wouldn't be suitable for the community page. This is more like a me thing. So I'm definitely going to keep this going. That pose there for Sun, there's a lot of foreshortening on his body. And the cape, it was challenging because it was making it harder to see how his body was positioned. It's kind of covering up his hips and part of his shoulder. So at this particular angle on his body, it's kind of hard to see. So the positioning of the legs was to try to make sure you get the sense of his body position, torso position, and hips. But I wanted that cape to be flying up too. So I've got him in a position where his legs are up in the air, like he's basically flown through the air right into his side. Very exaggerated, just like earlier in the desert, he like leapt through the air very high. And so this is, I haven't worked out the details here yet, but he's like superhuman in his strength and ability to jump. It's almost like a superhero's on the page here in this Sword and Sorcery comic. But I have to keep that under control. I can't let him be insanely powerful because it would ruin the story. Sword would no longer be necessary or helpful in the compared to such a strong boy. The challenges they're facing wouldn't be. They would have to be so. Scaled up so high that it would mess up the story. The other characters' ability to play roles in the story and so on. So trying to keep that under control, but still let it be pretty expressive and kind of big, exaggerated movements for Sun. Here I'm working out a difficult position on Sword. This is a lot of foreshortening on his body. We're seeing him kind of from the top of his shoulders, his head, down away from the camera. So his hips are behind his shoulders. His legs are shrinking behind him towards the vanishing point. I tried just throwing him on the page thinking that would work, but it wasn't working very well. So I've went back to the basics here, starting with the composition, the positioning of the things I knew. I knew how to draw. Like I knew I needed this large block of King Croc along the top of this long panel, and I wanted to be able to see the tip of the sword coming through that I just drew there. And that there had to be a little space on the right for you to see Sun in the distance. So kind of visualizing Sun in the far right and looking at how I've positioned King Croc, I kind of get a sense of the horizon line, the vanishing point here for Sword. So I take another crack at drawing Sword in this perspective. This is challenging, especially the more simplified and maybe even abstract you make your figures. I find it more challenging to do these extreme foreshortened drawings. So like if you're looking at the top of a leg, top of a knee, how do you show like that little bit of calf that you could see underneath it? And like maybe the ankle, you're not able to see like the heel, but you're going to see some ankle perhaps sticking out a little further than the calf. The creasing of the leg behind the knee, like is there any indication of that you can throw in? When your leg's straight, the muscles on the front of your leg are like constricted, they're tightened, you're going to get more definition. But when you stretch your foot back behind you, it stretches those muscles out on the front of your leg. There's not a lot of definition, so it's harder to indicate what that object is. So little bitty nuances you can put to show that, this is, a curve of a leg. Instead of just doing a straight line for legs and a little circle or block on the end for the knee, it starts to be perhaps helpful to create more nuanced shapes, that the thigh's a little thicker at the top left, thins out, and then maybe gets a little fatter where it folds at the knee. So more knowledge of anatomy can help to capture those things, and in a way you're capturing it without a whole lot of added detail. It's more just slight changes to the outline based on knowledge of the human form. So it can still be simplified. And that's like, that does get to the point of, this is one of the ways that I have been becoming more organic in my line work instead of like more geometric. I find that the more rounded and natural and organic my lines can be, the more I can capture nuances of the human form on even just on the outline of the form. Than if I went with a more blocky figure. So that's part of my journey. There's, on the one hand, there's simple shapes. Think like Mike Mignola, abstracted, simplified, not a lot of details added. More geometric, simple shapes for forms. But then, on the other hand, there's like more organic, natural lines that maybe on this end of the spectrum you could say realism, perhaps. But then you've got maybe on another axis realism and cartooning, like the throwing in lines on hands and faces and so on that wouldn't be there, it wouldn't be visible so much in real life, but is there to communicate like in a cartoon way, like it's sort of stylized. Think like anime faces or something. And so like I'm navigating all of those things, like, and I think we're all doing that. We're sort of finding our way and our style while navigating these different areas. And how you choose to navigate that, is based on taste, and it kind of shows where you're gonna end up will be different than someone else. For me, there's definitely a little bit of all of it, and I'm glad that I've been able to evolve to have more of a bit of all of it over time. The first few pages of a comic that I ever did was The Gray Judge, and you can see it on my website. All my comics are on there, free to read. The first maybe 10 pages of that, there was a lot of scribbling lines, like hatching, you could say, very expressive faces. It was just like I was just drawing the emotion and drawing things the way I kind of naturally draw. I may have said it on this channel before. I think my father said he preferred that in a way to what happened after, because I was trying to get faster and also like hide my mistakes with anatomy and whatnot, and just cleaner and more simple. And so I started going more abstract and simple, more like Mike Mignola. And instead of like cross-hatching or feathering lines, I was going with more like the large blocks of black, but with a sort of the large feathering that's like done with a pin, almost like a zigzag on the end, instead of a tapering brush stroke. So I don't know if that makes sense, but basically I started adjusting what I was doing in an effort to improve and become more efficient. But in so doing, in trying to cover up my mistakes and get faster it wasn't as expressive. It wasn't as personal and as personally expressive and as shameless, naive and innocent. And that is a nice quality in art. And I think I'm starting to get back to it a bit after 8 years. I'm getting back to that. To be more innocent and naive and just draw how I draw and let the inks look more like how I draw, let it just be, and let it be expressive in a personally way rather than kind of referential, rather than you could even think like instead of trying to control and I guess control and shape it to a systematic kind of way it should be, black and white rules. Instead of that kind of way, it's more personally expressive, open-ended, and open to becoming and changing, and a process-oriented rather than perfection or factory line production oriented. So, anyways, I can see in my art, I'm still in that process. You can even see it in this issue. At the start, it was much more like geometric, simple shapes on figures, less lines, or at least the lines were more straight. I still don't use a lot of lines, but the lines were much more angular and straight for things, and now I'm putting a lot more curves and details in the lines that convey like the form on Sword's arm right here on this page. So that's happened within the past year, continuing changing. So in process. But something in me also does want to get more solid, more solidified in what I'm doing. And so here I am getting, more open and letting things change. But part of me wants to get more hardened, more clear on where I'm trying to go, what I'm doing, how I present it to people. What would a cover that I draw look like, or an illustration, or a commission? Kind of what would be my approach to that versus someone else's? And and it's not just a matter of what am I capable of. It's what do I want to do. I've drawn covers and commissions and illustrations, and then I'm like, that wasn't that fun. Like, I don't want to continue this direction, even though I'm capable of it. This wasn't quite right for me. So trying to listen to, that feeling, that sense that this didn't feel quite right. It didn't motivate me that much. I'm kind of sick of it. And let that guide me towards what I should be doing with my art, what I am passionate about, so that I can have that naive passion, expression in my work. And I'm figuring that out, but I think, there's something in me that wants to figure that out more. I guess I'll have a chance, because this weekend I'm at Memphis Comic Expo, September 23rd, 24th. Just in a few days for me from where I'm recording this, but it'll be happening the day this video posts. So maybe I'll get a chance to do some commissions at the convention, and kind of get started with that. And I've been thinking about how I present my work at conventions, how I present my comics, like even on the convention table. So figuring that out. Here I am trying to find how much black to throw on King Croc's body. He's in shadow here, and I want him to feel heavier on the top of the page, so I knew I needed to add more black. So So I just was using the brush to add more. Same with like kind of off the page here. I'm going in, adding a little more black on the King Croc shapes on those two panels above that, because I'm trying to add some weight and depth to the panels. So kind of like one last look at it. When in doubt, add more black, right? Not necessarily, but that's what I'm doing there. And this time I remembered which of his feet are injured. Yeah, if his foot looks funny there, it's kind of like it's torn in half. So yeah, he's going to need some serious medical attention, ancient medical attention, in the next issue, I would say. Yeah, there's the page. That's a very narrow, wide panel at the top. That was a nice choice, composition there. I'm trying to push the boundaries a little more on the panels. Yeah, the simple colors I've been doing on this issue, they're basically all the same yellowish green, with different, values of light and dark. And the final panel, I let those word balloons kind of trail from left to right to make sure your eye goes across that panel, that you do look at sun on the far right and sword on the left, and not just kind of skip over it. So I decided to add a little dialogue there where he tells the boy to run, because on the next page the boy's going to like leap in to try to help him. And I didn't want, I thought it would drive the point home even more if he was told not to do that even before he did it. The point that sword will make on the coming pages. So it turned out, like in my mind, better for the story to go ahead and add that dialogue, and I did that when I was in the lettering phase after coloring it. The last thing, I was just seeing that the trailing balloons would look nice, and it was a good chance to go ahead and add that. And it's believable too, because it's kind of a pause moment in the action where everyone's kind of recollecting themselves, and even the camera and the composition's very kind of long and static there. So it's a point where someone could, cough, pause, say something, pause, say something again. I couldn't put that on a panel that's happening quickly, that has so much action that it wouldn't make sense. So I'm looking at the finished page and I'm seeing what feels right, and that guides my choices too on what I have them say. And that's it for this week. So I'm off to Memphis. It's a 5-hour drive. That'll be fun. And I'll be there when this video posts on Sunday. Be the practice of your art. That's what I'll be doing. See you next time.